Okay, at this point we'll deal with the content in the middle of the page, the main body of the content, which is defined by the div tag right here, if I highlight that. And that holds the two subsections, the section tags, which ultimately will be the left column, and down here the aside tag, which will be the right column. Okay, but the first thing I want to do is actually just push this all down. So I already defined a class style with the div tag, so let's actually create that class style now and push this content down using our margins. So I'm going to add a selector here, and because I was inside of that area with my insert, it did come up as a hint dot container, so I'm just going to hit my return key. Otherwise you can just type in dot container to create it. And I'm going to turn off show set, and we'll go down to our margins here, and let's just push it down from the top to start with. Okay. And I can always adjust this later, but I'm going to say that's probably, oh, you know what, that content for class container, I'm going to get rid of that. Okay. I'm just going to go down to my code view here and completely get rid of that placeholder. It was good when I needed it, but now I don't need it. So let's just click there, and there we go. Okay, so I'm going to also conclude that where I have this right now is a pretty good place, 70 pixels from the top. I can always come back and readjust that later, but for now, let's just live with that. So let's do a save all here. And the other thing I want to do with the content in the middle is actually not go edge to edge. I'm going to set it to about a 90% width and also center it. So let's go up to our width and set that to percentage. And I'm just going to drag that up to 90%. You can see that content expanding there, 90%. Okay, just zeroing in here. And if it's hard to get with the scroller, you can always type it in. There we go, finally. Okay, but I do want to center it, right? Right now it's just a line to the left. And the way we center it is using the margins. We can set the units to auto on the left and on the right. There we go. And that's really all I'm going to do with the container, right? I push the content down. Maybe I'll push it down a little farther here. Okay. Maybe make it a round number, 80. And it is now centered. So the next step I want to do is deal with the left and right column, if you will. Okay, so the left and right column will be dictated by a couple more selectors. I'm going to define the section as well as the aside. So I'll put them both in at the same time so we can work on both of them more or less at the same time as well. So I'm going to add section, and then I'll add aside. Okay, there we go. I'm just going to pull this down a little bit here. So what we want to do is we want to float them. We'll float the section to the left and the aside to the right, and then we'll adjust their width by percentage. And the sum of the two percentages should not exceed 100%. Otherwise, they will just stack again. So I'll start with the section. And let's see here, and I'll go and set the float to left. Okay, now I'll remind you, float is relative to its container, right? And it's in a div tag, so it's just going to float inside of the div tag to the left. And I might as well float the aside to the right. So I'm clicking on the side here, float to the right. And due to the percentages, they're not going to really show much yet. So let's go back to the section and address the width. And again, I'll set that to a percentage. And we'll just drag that out. And I'm going to say maybe bring it up to 60%. Yeah, and don't worry, the footer is hanging up there. We will address that in a little while. Okay, so 60% width on the section. Let me click over to a side. And it has to be less than 40%. So maybe I'll go maybe 35% or so. Let's get that down to 35, and now they do sit side by side. The images I'm going to deal with shortly, we're going to make them so that they resize by percentage as well. Okay. But right now we have the two columns, and if I just click on show set here, we got the float and the percentage of the width for each. Okay, so I'm just going to do a save all again for that. Okay, the one big glaring thing that I see are my images at this point. So let's make a new class style and attach it to those images. I'm just going to come in here and make a new class style, and we'll make the width according to a percentage. Okay, and that way they will resize and they'll fit actually better. So let's just add a new selector here, and I'm just going to call it dot picture frame. Okay, and I'm going to use that style also to put a border on it, a white border, and a nice little drop shadow. Okay, so there's picture frame, check show set, and I'll start with the width, and I'll use a percentage here, and I'm going to make them 90%. 90%, okay, and I'll hit my enter key, and I'll set height to auto. There we go. And I will actually attach that before making any more settings. All right, so I'm just going to select this photo here. Now, if you're in live view, you can click on the plus sign and add it there. And if I was to type it in, I probably would get a code hint, picture frame right there. Okay, hit that, and I'll apply it to the next one down here. Highlight that photo, click on the plus sign. Of course, the other way you can do it is going down to your class inside of properties. Okay, right here again, dot picture frame, and I just start to type it and I get my code hints. There we go. So now they're sizing nicely. All right, so a little easier to look at. And again, ignore the footer for now. We're going to address that in a little while. We'll push it down a little later. Let's continue with the decoration of these picture frames. Okay, so I'm going to go now to the border, and we'll set a width. I'm going to go with 4 pixels. 4 pixels. Style, we'll go with solid. And color, I'm going to make them white. Okay, like that. And if I scroll up here, you'll see that. And we'll add a drop shadow, which will give it even more emphasis. So we're going to use a box shadow, which is a background feature down here, and I am going to go a little bit on the horizontal as well as the vertical here, and I'll start just by dragging that out, and I guess I can look at it over here as this keeps bouncing down here, and I'll do about 6 on the vertical as well, so that kind of comes down at a 45-degree angle if I go to the bottom corner here, and I definitely want to soften that, so I'm going to use my blur feature, and I'll go by eye here. And that doesn't look too bad. If I want to adjust it later, I can always come back. Okay, I will formally declare the color to black, even though it does default to black as well. Okay, so pretty well that is our picture frame set. We're going to establish the width, established a decorative border of white, and a decorative drop shadow. Okay, so let's just do a save all to retain that. Now, I still have more to do with working this content in the middle, but I think I want to address this footer issue now and kind of put it in its place and then return to this and finesse it a bit, okay? So we will create another new selector for the footer. Just going to make a little room here and add a selector for the footer. So I'll type that in, footer, hit my return key. Okay, so first thing I want to do is I want to push it down. And I also want to give it a background color. Why don't I define a background color first, and then you'll actually see what area the footer is occupying. Okay, so we'll click off show set. I'll go to backgrounds, and I'll just set a color of middle gray here, I guess. Middle gray. Again, that can be changed later if I want to, and hit my return key. And look at that footer. It's actually taken up so much room there behind these two floating elements. So if you recall with floats and clears, a clear won't allow a float to appear on the left, or clear right won't allow a float to appear on the right, and clear both won't allow any floats to appear on either side. Therefore, it will push it below the floated elements. So let's go down to our floats and clears. And we're just going to clear both. Okay, I click clear both, and let's take a look at the bottom of the page. And there it is. Okay, so let's also establish some size to it, and we're going to fix it to the bottom. Okay, so let's see here. I'm just going to, actually, I guess I'll add some padding to give it some height. Okay, and let's say maybe 6 or 7 pixels here on the top, and 6 or 7. I'll match it on the top and the bottom. There we go, and that's all right. I'm going to center the text using CSS here. Text align, center. There we go for that. And I think I'm also going to come down to position here. Where is it here? And just set the bottom to 0 pixels. 0 pixels. And that should make it cling to the bottom of the page. All right, let's do a save all here and very quickly have a peek in the browser. So up to Google Chrome. And there we go. And there is our footer at the bottom. Let me just bring my browser in a bit. There we go. Okay, so there's my footer at the bottom, and it is always at the bottom. Ultimately, I'm going to give it a bit more space down here under this content, and we're going to work this area a bit more. But our footer, for the most part, is now completed. So the nav is done at the top, footer is done at the bottom. We're going to do a little fine tuning in the middle here before we ultimately get to our media queries. Okay, so back to Dreamweaver. Okay, so now the footer's done. Let's go back and work that middle section a bit more. I want to address this image here and create the wraparound text for it and make some fine-tuning adjustments as well. Okay, so I will need to create a class style to create the wrap feature. All right, so I'm going to click on my selectors and add a new selector here. And I'll just click on that, and I'm going to type it in dot wrapper, so it'll be a class style. And maybe I'll attach it right away to that image, and then we can see the effects manifest immediately. So I'm going to click on that graphic if I can. I'll add it through the plus sign here. I'm in live mode right now. And dot wrapper, and it does appear as a code hint. There we go. And now let's start to decorate that wrapper. So what I want to do is I want to float it within the paragraph. It's currently an inline item, so the other elements, the text, will just move up, okay? And then we'll create a little space between the text and the image. So to start with, let's go down here to our floats, and we'll do a float left. And you see right now, that's what basically creates the wrap, okay? But it's a little too tight. So I'm going to go down to my padding, or rather my margins, which is on the outside of the box. And I'm just going to do it by eye here. I'm going to go to the right and push that out. And I'm looking at, let's see here, maybe if I go, now I'm just being fussy. I'll say 12 pixels, and let's try the bottom as well. Bottom might be good at 0, but I'm just going to push it a little bit here and go an extra line, and maybe I'll make that 12 as well for now, okay? But you see here, it is creating some space. Maybe I'll create a little more space on the right. We'll go up a little higher here, and maybe I'll go 16. 16. Okay, again, I may adjust that later, but for now, that's pretty good. I'm just going to do a save all. And I'm going to create a little frame around that one as well with a drop shadow. Okay. Okay, so let me just go down to my border area here. And we'll start with a width. I'm going to make consistent with what I previously created on the other images. And we'll make that 4 pixels. Now, I can't reuse that other picture frame because it's addressing the width, and I don't want to actually change the width on this specific image, okay? Otherwise, I could have just borrowed picture frame. So we're going to go with a solid line, 4 pixels, and I'll declare color of white. And I will also throw a drop shadow in there because you can't even really detect that there without the drop shadow. And the drop shadow, again, is part of the background. Box shadow. I will, again, be consistent. It was 6 pixels horizontally and 6 pixels vertically. I'm actually typing this in here now. I'll try to scroll that one up. There we go. And I'll blur that out to, 10, 11, 12-ish. Okay, 11 like that. And that's looking pretty good. And it certainly defines the image. Okay. And again, I will officially declare the color as black. There we go. Save all. All right, so I also want to make this first paragraph bigger. There's a number of ways I could do that. I'm going to use another CSS class style and attach it to this first paragraph. So I think I'll just call this subhead. This will be the heading. This could be kind of the subhead, if you will, for lack of better terms. So dot subhead. Okay, and I'll define a font size. I'm just going to go with the size. Font size, let's see here. I'll go with pixels, and we will I'll see what 18 looks like. And I have to apply it. You're not seeing anything change yet. So that's this paragraph right here. And again, I can add it right here, right? Dot subhead, and there it is in my hints. All right. I'm going to live with that 18. It just makes that first paragraph more important than the second one, okay? You know what? Or maybe, let's see here. Maybe I'll actually make it even a little bigger. So let's maybe go, now that it's connected, you can see how it updates live, right? And maybe 22. See how that looks on the page. Yeah, that's good. I'm going to run with that, okay? So speaking of that, why don't I do the same thing for this headline? I know it's an H1. I believe that's an H1 as well. So I'll create a special class style. These are a whole bunch of little class styles kind of for custom situations, all right? And I will attach it to that H1. So maybe I'll start by going into the opening H1 tag, space, class equals, and I will make up a name. I'll call it headline. All right, headline. And now I'll come over here and create one by that name, and we will see it affect that particular area. Okay, so I'm just shortening that to dot headline, and again, text, font size, pixels. I'm just going to drag it up till it looks good to me. And what am I looking at here? Maybe 44. Okay. Again, if I want to change that later, I can. Here's something I want to do, though, too, with the aside. I want to push the aside down. Okay. It's riding a little higher here. So let's go over to our aside. So I'm fine-tuning here, right? Aside. Go down to the margins, and we'll push that from the top. And you can see how that's pushing from the top of its parent, right, the container. And I'm just going to go by eye and push that down to about there. Okay, save all. All right, let's have a look in the browser and see what this looks like. Okay, and there we go. So I'm going to make a bit of room down here, and I'm going to make one more custom frame for the video window, and that should take care of our middle section. Okay, it does flow, right, if I change my things. And you see how those two images, they do resize because they were set to a percentage. Whereas the small image is keeping its consistent size. All right, because it's not really something that I want to shrink. Okay, almost home on this. So we will create a little space here, and we'll create a custom border with drop shadow for the video. Again, I can't use that same picture frame for the video because it will not address the dimensions properly. So back to Dreamweaver. And I can do one before the other. Maybe we'll do the frame for the video first. So in there, and I can add it here too as well, I believe. I'll just have to manually put it in. Dot video frame. Okay, now I'll actually, select the source. Oh, this is cool. I can actually put it in right away. Like that. Video frame. There it is. Okay, so I want to put a border, a drop shadow, And I think we'll keep that at a 90% width as well. So maybe I'll start with the size here. Width, percentage, 90. Again, that's percentage of the aside tag, right? So it's all relative here. 90. Height, I'm going to set it to auto. Actually, we're not going to set the height to auto. I'm going to delete that. Okay, and we'll do the border. So I'll do a width, again, consistent with the rest, so we'll go 4 pixels wide. Solid, white color. And we'll throw a drop shadow on the background features here. Box shadow, again 6 by 6 here for the shadows. And I'll soften that up with the blur property. And it seemed like 10, 11, or 12 was pretty good for that. So we'll go with 11. And again, I will officially declare the color of the shadow here like that. So if I shorten this, show set, we've got a width of 90, border, and a shadow. Let me just do a save all. And one more time in the browser. Okay, so we have consistency, you know, with our graphics, and I'm just going to push this down. So this is the section tag, so I just have to push my margins at the bottom down to push that footer away. I don't want it to be so tight like that, okay? So back to Dreamweaver, a little more fine tuning. I'm going to go up to my section here, and I'll go down to margins, and if I scroll this down, we can probably observe it, I hope. And yeah, it does shift here, but you saw it moving. So I'm going to go about, I say about 20 pixels, and let's see how that looks. You know what? I think I'm going to even go further, 30 pixels. And that's reasonable. At least it's not like what we call a hotspot where there's a tight little line between, okay? Save all. And I believe that will conclude the middle section. Let's have one more look in the browser, Google Chrome. And there we go. Okay. So all of our content is done. So we're going to head to the new features today known as media queries, which again is a feature to change the nature of your content, how it's presented based on, well, technically based on the width of the browser. And that's how you detect the various devices that your browser is on. So, you know, the browser width would be a certain width for a phone versus a tablet versus desktop. Okay, so let's just proceed, and I'll introduce you to the media queries.